What's up, everybody? We are back for another episode of Digital Banter Live. Joining us today is Brianna Doe, co-founder and CMO of Verbatim. Brianna, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Okay, so Verbatim, tell us a little bit about it, just because the name itself is a little, obscure, but I think it's important that we get some understanding about what you do as an agency and consultancy, but also the background of it.
Definitely. Yeah. So we chose an obscure but hip name on purpose because we're really cool. And the goal of Verbatim is to help mission-driven brands and entrepreneurs and solopreneurs move the needle and start building their businesses in a way that makes the most sense to them. So we specialize in growth marketing, content marketing, personal branding, so all things LinkedIn, and influencer marketing, primarily on LinkedIn. And that's broad because at least right now we're customizing the way we work with each client specifically. We can come in as just like a strategy and thought partner, or literally become your in-house team or an extension of your existing team and manage all the day-to-day execution and implementation. So when Alexis and I launched, my business partner, we thought a lot about who we wanted to work with and what kind of brands we want to work with. And it was really important for us to focus less on the industry. To be blunt, we don't really care if you're B2B or B2C or like health and wellness or a SaaS product. It's more about what your goals are, what your mission is, and if we're aligned on values.
Very cool. And I know, the angle of today's conversation is around influencer marketing. And
Yes.
I think James and I would consider you an influencer on your own, which is a good background and jumping off point for today's conversation too. Now, I will argue with James's description of today's event that he wrote up about, being slow to jump on the bandwagon and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about, discussing the takeoff of influencer marketing, especially in the realm of B2B.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to watch, right? Because we've always seen it for as long as I can remember with D2C. That's primarily where my background has been too, at least for the past 7 or 8 years, was D2C influence marketing. You see it on Instagram, you saw it on Twitter, not so much anymore. You see it on YouTube. And there's so many resources about it. There's so many ways for brands to engage with influencers and content creators, to find them, to build partnerships and long-term relationships. But I feel like for a while, the idea of B2B influencer marketing was weird. People just didn't really associate the two. But to me, there aren't that many differences, right? Like business to business, sure, but you're still selling to people, and people like to connect with other people. And so if you can build trust and credibility with your target audience through people that they trust, I think it's a really, really effective tool.
Yeah, that's very similar to what we talked about with Jared Fuller last week during Nearbound. How do you surround yourselves by those that are closest to your customers and kind of take it from there as a conversation point? Sorry, James, I know we jumped over.
No, it's interesting because I think one of the things that I wanted to get into is what some of the differences are between what you've seen on the D2C side and what works on the B2B side, right? I think that we've all seen on LinkedIn at this point some posts put out by a creator that is, to me, obviously promoted, right? And there's rules around that too that you have to abide by, as far as making sure there's something that's promoted versus something that is a true partnership with a creator, co-creating content. And basically there's different levels of it.
Right.
I guess my question to you is what are some of the differences that you see that more so make a difference in B2B that maybe the play doesn't work as well on the D2C side, or maybe vice versa?
Well, on one hand, so it's really taken off, I would say, this year and maybe a few years before this too. It's been slowly growing, and I've seen it so much more this year. But that being said, it still feels new to a lot of people, both to the audiences who are being, targeted with the sponsored content and to the influencers that are working in this space. And so when I think about D2C, I feel like it's easier for it to feel natural. Brands work with influencers for sponsored posts, of course, but like you mentioned, co-creating content, having them speak at events for them or record content for them, whatever it looks like. It's really broad, and brands are really open to partnering different ways. The feeling around B2B influencer marketing is we're still figuring it out, right? And so you just start with sponsored posts. It's just the simplest way. It makes the most sense. You are paying an influencer basically for their audience for a post, and that's it. And it's a great way to dive in and test the waters without like fully committing to a program. But it's like you mentioned, it's also really obvious if it's inauthentic, like if the influencer's literally never used the product before or doesn't care about it, or just doesn't actually resonate with the company or align with the company. So that's one thing that we as marketers really need to be cognizant of, is not just doing it because we can, because we see it working for other companies, but building out campaigns and programs really intentionally and with the right influencers in the right space.
So
I
how
think
do
it's
you
a good. Hang
go
on,
ahead?
sorry. I think it's a good point though that you kind of allude to, is the fact that B2B, you just need to be more creative in how you do everything. You can't be boring, number one. You have to resonate with your customers, and it's a lot more difficult to do that when you don't necessarily have like a physical product or a well-known service, which, great. You ship somebody something, you unbox it, great. There's your influencer play on D2C. But on B2B, yes, I will blanket statement what I'm about to say here, but there's so many boring marketers out there that can't be creative in how they go to market and distribute their message. And I think that's one hang up that they really have with influencers is, okay, well, how am I going to do this effectively? But how do I creatively do this? Because it's not as easy as it is on the D2C side of things.
That's a really good point. And it reminds me of the video James just posted, like talking about this event, which made me laugh out loud. You can't just have somebody like unbox their Salesforce subscription and make this fun little video. It's just not the same. It's a different type of product. And I mean, we've all seen it this year, right? Like budgets are being slashed, have been slashed. Teams are bare bones. Like marketers might want to take risks and be creative, but they have a leadership team to answer to who might just not be open to it. We don't have the money for it, or we just need to do what's been working, like just stick to our playbook. But you need that creativity in influencer marketing. Otherwise, honestly, you might as well just stick to your blog or what's already been working. It's only worth it if you're willing to really, really get creative.
So I wanted to dive into, you mentioned like finding the right people being like super important. I think that is probably what B2B marketers struggle with the most. Like, how do you find the right creator who has the reach in your niche that you want, and kind of how do you validate their following and their audience to make sure that's a right fit before you even reach out?
Yeah, that is the $1 million question. I will do a shameless plug. You can work with Verbatim and we will find them for you. But more importantly, I think regardless of whether you work with an agency or you're doing it on your own, before anything else, you need to define who you're trying to target. And I'm sure most marketers will say, we know who our ICP is, but think about it in terms of how that target audience shows up on LinkedIn and who they're following, who they trust. Really, really define who you want to target and how, and in what ways you can do that effectively before you even talk to a single influencer. From there, the interesting thing is that when I think about like Instagram or TikTok, you have so many platforms that source these kind of partnerships for you. When my business partner and I were getting ready to launch, we did a lot of research to see like who our competitors were, and nobody had a LinkedIn option. It was Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, and like maybe Pinterest. But there's really no easy way like to find content creators in one place. You have to search for them through hashtags or just by being on LinkedIn and scrolling. So what I would recommend is by starting with defining your target audience and who you want to reach, start looking at your decision makers and who they're following. What content are they engaging with? If they create content, who's commenting on their posts, like see who they're building relationships with, and then see how they have engagement. Like, how are they doing? Do they have an audience? Have they built trust? I would also say once you have one influencer, you can get referrals, especially with B2B. It's such a small industry when it comes to influencer marketing. So they will know content creators in a similar niche or industry, and they'll connect you to them. It's really easy to form partnerships that way. And if all else fails, just post about it. Like, say that you're trying to start doing influencer marketing and you're interested in working with content creators who are passionate about your product and align with your values. Those are really easy grassroots ways to just start digging in.
So I think like one thing that is obviously trending right now is AI, which creates questionable authenticity when it comes to honestly, like any form of content and creators and the content that's put out by creators. Like, how has that changed how you, I don't know, has it changed how you validate and look at creators?
Yeah, because you have AI and then you also have a lot more engagement pods lately. And so people are able to manufacture engagement and make it look like they built trust. And it's really easy to do that now, which is frustrating and it makes it difficult because you can think that you're partnering with the right people and you're not. So what I'd recommend is not just looking, when you go to look at an influencer, don't just look at like their last few posts. See what their trends have been over the past like 30 to 60 days. Do you see consistent engagement? Do you see engaging and interesting content? And also just how does it feel? Does it feel robotic? Because if it does, you don't really want to work with them either. You want to work with somebody who has an authentic voice, whatever that looks like for them, and who feels really comfortable creating content. I would also say, when you do start working with influencers, you should have contracts in place. And I strongly recommend having a clause in there regarding pods and AI generated content. We do. So for Verbatim, we have the influencer creator network that you can join. And there is a contract associated with it, even though we're not exclusive. And it very clearly states that if you sign this and you join the program, you are agreeing that you will never like join an engagement pod in any form. And if you do, it's reason for us to remove you from the program. So having that safeguard in place also just makes it a lot safer for brands, because we are seeing an uptick in pods and AI.
So define engagement pods. James, I mean, all three of us know what that means, but
True.
define it.
So an engagement pod is, short answer, an engagement pod is something that you join as a content creator that you typically pay for access to, and you're trading likes and comments. So it works in one of two ways. You're in a pod with, let's say, like 50, 75 people, other content creators. And every time one of you posts, you like post the link and everybody else that comes in engages with it, says like, great post, or thanks for sharing, things like that. The other way is when it's not really trading it. You just pay. And once you have a post, the pod basically sends like an army of just hundreds, maybe thousands of fake like bots and comments to really beef up the engagement on your post, which is also a good way to see how authentic somebody's engagement is. Just look at the comments. Like if you're not actually seeing real conversations in there, if you're seeing a lot of the same messaging, it's a sign. It's not a definite sign, but it's a red flag.
I feel like there's another, it's not really a flag, but with the proliferation and launch of like thought leader ads on LinkedIn, you know, you wonder how you talk about buying vanity metrics, right? Well, how many of the posts that I might come across when I'm trying to research influencers are boosted up by them running their own thought leader ads or on behalf of another organization and just getting that pay to play piece of things that boosts up, you know, likes and vanity metrics. It probably has comments associated with it too, don't get me wrong, but like how it comes back to that authentic versus inauthentic approach to driving and engaging the market too, I think, right?
Yeah, there's so many obstacles lately as people are trying to like boost that engagement and position themselves in certain ways online. The thought leadership ads are an interesting one because when you look at like a company page, it's really transparent. You can go to the ads section and see what ads they're running. As far as I know, unless I don't have the functionality yet, LinkedIn does not have that same functionality for personal profiles. So it's a bit of a gray area in terms of how you track it.
And right now I don't think you can actually see, because we run some thought leader ads through like myself and Andy on behalf of the company. I do not think that those posts show in the ad section for the brand.
No, they don't.
Really interesting. I'm surprised they don't.
Yeah.
Honestly.
So I know we've been talking about LinkedIn influencers as kind of the primary angle here, but I'm curious to get your thoughts, Brianna. Like there's so many industries that exist out there where their target audiences do not frequent LinkedIn enough to justify that being the primary channel. Does that mean that influencer marketing doesn't work or isn't a play for them? I mean, I think like, for example, let's think about like lawyers as a target audience or CPAs or anybody in that finance perspective, right? They don't go on LinkedIn to read content most likely, or they frequent it enough to justify it being the primary. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on, does that mean influencers dead or is it just a different way of looking at it then?
That's a really good question. Short answer, no. Like that doesn't mean that influence marketing is not a good tactic. That's why it's so important to get creative on how you do it. It doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be just a batch of sponsored posts on LinkedIn. Typically what you see and what you're starting to see more of, people that create content on LinkedIn specifically are also diversifying their reach. So they have newsletters, they might have a blog, they are on TikTok or YouTube or other channels. They're also engaging online in other ways. And so if you have a lawyer who does create content on LinkedIn, actually I follow one and he's really funny. He also has a newsletter and he has other tools to create and distribute content. So what's most important is when you take that first step of identifying how you want to reach your target audience, keep that in mind. Like LinkedIn posts might not be the best fit, but the influencer that you see on LinkedIn, see what his engagement is and open rates on his newsletter. Do you want to co-create content with him? Should you do like blog content or video content with them? So be open to finding influencers and content creators through different platforms and then seeing how you can diversify how you work with them.
Yeah, it goes back to everything that James, you and I talk about all the time. It's like, where does your market hang out online and what do they consume?
Yeah.
If you don't do that baseline research, like you're talking about, Brianna, like forget about LinkedIn, forget about influencers. Like you have to know your market and your audience first and foremost. If you don't know that, then you're just tossing shit out there and hoping it sticks.
Exactly. And that's why it's also important to think about the platform that you're trying to reach them on. So I'm in marketing. However, when I'm on Instagram, I don't really want to be hit with ads about marketing products because I'm trying to just vibe, like I'm not in work mode. So keeping that in mind, where I hang out and what my goals or objectives are with each platform is really important.
James buys all his fishing supplies off of Instagram and YouTube. So.
I mean, it's so true. I have I have designed my feeds based on each platform to fit a certain thing, right? Like I use Facebook for family engagement and stuff like that. Instagram, I literally use for like shopping for fishing stuff and other hobbies. And LinkedIn is all the work stuff, right? And I don't touch any of the other platforms. But
well, TikTok is all the funny stuff that you just share with
TikTok. I've never posted to though. So it's like I should.
Oh, okay. So what your posts, okay. I see what you're saying.
Well, it is also like curating my feed. Like you can like and engage with certain things and then the algorithm serves you more things that you want to see, right? So like I have it geared that way.
My TikTok is perfectly curated, so I feel you.
Yeah, I mean it's there's work that goes into that, right?
Yeah, it takes time and effort.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned before, Brianna, about contracts, right? When you're about to engage an influencer. And I think one thing that we talked about when we were kind of prepping for this episode is, how do you know what to pay an influencer? Like, what is their compensation model, or how do you even start that conversation and start to plan for it from a budgeting perspective?
Yeah. So what I like to tell brands and creators is a great baseline to start with is 1% to 2% of their follower count as a baseline. Now, there's a lot that goes into that. There are a lot of variables. Do you want a text-only post? Do you want them to record and edit video content? Are they co-creating, let's say, like a blog post with you? So they're doing research and then writing and editing. Is it a bundle of posts? There are a lot of different things to consider, but it's great to just start with that as a baseline. And then from there, you can get creative and work with them on how that compensation is actually delivered. Some brands that I've worked with and that we're working with do a flat rate and then pair that with a cost per impressions. So let's say to be specific, let's say it's like $500 for the flat rate. And then for every 1,000 impressions, it's like $5. So it's a great way for brands to kind of have a baseline, but still be open to like engaging the creator more to make sure that they're also invested in, the post performing. You can do flat rates. There are also brands that do like affiliate marketing too. Whatever you do, what I would keep in mind is make sure you're asking yourself, even after this content creator publishes the post or releases the video, how do I incentivize them to actually be interested in the post's performance or in the content's performance? Doesn't necessarily have to be monetary, but it's just important to keep that in mind, in my opinion.
It's interesting because it's almost like a hybrid between what you would pay somebody to create content versus like what their reach is, right? So you're basically paying them for their reach, and then there's a whole separate piece that's based on the actual content production itself, right? Like you
Yeah.
could hire a ghostwriter to do $1,500 for a blog post, right? Like there's that level of effort that has to go into creating whatever that piece of content is, plus the reach that you're getting out of it.
Yeah, which is, you bring up a really good point, because I mean, you're not just paying for, it's not like you're just paying for like a billboard, right? You're paying this person specifically because you value their voice and the trust that they built with their audience. So whether it's ghostwriting a blog or whatever it is, like making sure that you're allowing their natural voice to come through is great when it comes to building long-term partnerships, which I believe should be the goal.
And I feel like that's like a hurdle that in the B2B space, like you just kind of need to blow through, because there's so much emphasis out there on maintaining brand consistency, brand voice, owning the narrative and deciding what that narrative is. And I think when you are ready to step into the influencer game, you got to remove that. Like you have to, it goes, again, I don't want to kill the horse here of authenticity, but like it does come back to that, because you can't do that and still expect an authentic voice that's going to resonate with that influencer's audience.
Exactly. And they, to be blunt, like they don't work for you. They're not your employee. They're not your marketer. So and also to be more blunt, I've in the past spoken to brands who wanted to do a brand partnership, but wanted to basically just give me content to post. And it's just like, well, first of all, no. Also, if you're just going to pay me like I'm a billboard, that's not the point. You can just run an ad. So it's, the whole point is to let the content creator do their thing, and write the way that write or record a video the way that they know is best for their audience.
Yeah, there's a reason they're called content creators, because they are creating.
Yeah, you're a creator, not an influencer until you have influence.
That should be on a t-shirt.
I stole it from somewhere.
It probably is.
No, I'm not taking credit for that. I stole it from somewhere.
Give it 2 weeks. I'll have it on my website.
So I got one more. One thing I want to encourage anybody who has any questions, feel free to like turn this into an AMA in the comments. I know Brianna had one of those before and absolutely crushed it. But I'm going to ask like one more question that I think is like really important for the B2B side. Because in B2B, we have to measure everything. Brands don't really come to us and say like, oh, we want to grow awareness, blah, 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 blah. Like that's usually never the goal. Usually you're, slapped with a question from your CFO of like, how many leads did we get from this? How much revenue did it drive, et cetera. Right. So I guess my high level question is like, how do you go about measuring all of this?
Yeah, because that's a good point. If you don't have a strong understanding of how you're going to define success, it still is pretty pointless. You're going to end the campaign and not know if it actually worked or not, or know what you're looking for. So even if you're running your first influence marketing campaign as a test, you should still define success at the beginning. So there are a lot of ways you can measure it. It's funny, there are some B2B brands that I've talked to and worked with who were focused solely on awareness, or like increased interest. And even with that, that's great, but we still need to define that. So I'll just list off some ways. It could be increased website traffic. So make sure you're giving each content creator campaign URL with UTM tracking so that you can actually attribute traffic in the right place. So increased website traffic, the increased demos or signups, direct revenue and sales, depending on like what your sales cycle is. Is it a product that people can just go purchase? You can also look at general engagement. So if you're running it on LinkedIn, are you seeing more traffic to your LinkedIn page? Are you seeing more engagement with, if it's a small company like your CEO or your founder? Those are all really great ways. Honestly, I prefer to do a hybrid where direct sales and revenue are great, but like demos, like demo signups and anything you can relate to a wait list, I think is a really great way to track it, because it's interesting being on the content creation side and the marketing side. Like as a marketer, I want to say, well, I ran this campaign and we drove like 50K in revenue. That's the goal, right? Or more, obviously, is the goal. But I still kind of put that on the marketer, right? Is your website optimized for this traffic? Is your website optimized for like the leads that are coming in? Sorry, I just saw a comment come through. So yeah, it's really important to make sure that you have everything in place for when that engagement and web traffic starts coming through. and be open to redefining what success can look like.
I think another, just to add on top of that, I mean, this has been watered down, but any kind of like company level demographic insights too from the creator is important, especially when we think about B2B and that ABM mentality. You know, if we're seeing an account show engagement and viewing the content that a creator's putting out there, and then all of a sudden that account spikes in the CRM or enters the CRM, I mean, I think there's that indirect relationship that you can at least anecdotally apply to measurement too.
Exactly. Yes. And for those who don't know, you can get that information from the influencer. I would recommend 7 days after if it's a post, after the post has gone live, have them go into their post analytics and pull everything, like locations, job title, seniority, all of that. It's really helpful context.
Yeah. And working that into the contract too, to make sure that you don't get burned on the brand side.
Yes. I am always a fan of comprehensive, thorough contracts.
So I want to throw a question out there that just came through from Gabriel Alvarez. Would you recommend running a full funnel campaign with an influencer? And I think if you can just kind of expound upon that, of how that would work too.
I would not recommend it. I think, okay, short answer is the longer a partnership is with an influencer, one, the more times their audience will see your brand, see the name, start to recognize it. Two, the more trust you'll build because they keep seeing that name. So the longer the partnership can be, the more interest and engagement you're going to see. If it's the right fit, if you've chosen the right influencer or group of influencers to work with, I think that's a great play. So I would recommend it. And I would be open to defining that with the influencer, like give them your goals and what you see. If they don't understand funnels, for example, like what you want to accomplish with each stage of the funnel, and work with them to create that content. It also goes back to what I said at the beginning, and I think in the middle, like be open to expanding it outside of just sponsored posts, like let them become a part of the actual marketing process and the marketing campaign.
And then another question that just came through is on the flip side of this, on the influencer side. So how do you think personality wraps into growing your initial audience base?
It's a good question. I mean, I think you have to be likable. Nobody really wants to follow somebody that they don't like and just don't connect to, right? I would not follow somebody that I didn't connect to on some level. And so I think it makes sense that personality plays a factor. I'm laughing because I think with my content specifically, when I think about like my experience on LinkedIn, a friend of mine actually pointed this out. I don't talk a lot about my personal life. You don't know a lot about me. You don't know if I have kids, if I'm married, like anything like that, but you know a lot about my career journey. So when we think about personality, I think that's also something to consider. You don't have to share everything about yourself in order to seem like transparent or to seem likable. You can share whatever you're comfortable with. But yeah, I think you have to be somebody that people can connect to. And that being said, your community is on the platform. It's just a matter of them finding you and you finding them.
Yeah, I think
I'm curious what you two think.
Well, I was going to say, I think that connection piece that you just mentioned at the end is huge, because if I want to get value out of whoever I follow. I want to make sure that it's curated, right? I don't accept everybody that reaches out to me on LinkedIn. Like if I know a pitch slap is coming, I can smell it a mile away. I'm not accepting you. Sorry.
Yeah.
But that being said, like most of the people I follow and connect with, I've never met in person. I have no idea what their true personality is, but I feel something as a connection when I read their content. Maybe I agree with it, maybe I disagree with it, but I respect it. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that connection piece of letting a personality really grow into what is the connection that you're trying to make with your market and your audience following.
I think a personality can make or break a person, honestly. I'm actually a firm believer that like people who host podcasts, like the reason that you follow, there's two reasons you listen to a podcast, right? You're interested in the topic, or you actually follow the person who is running the podcast. Like I have 10 podcasts that I listen to. I just check to see if there's something that is actually relevant to me. And then I have 2 or 3 that are people who I respect in the industry and, almost like follow at a personal level too. I mean, you mentioned like talking about like you kind of keep your personal life out of it. Sometimes I like that because it makes it relatable and being especially in, I think in our space, like I want something that's relatable, right? Like I want somebody who has gone through the stuff that I'm going through now, has worked their way through it and want to be, and like you almost feel that level with it, even though like you have no idea who the person is. I'm like, we talk about certain people that we follow on LinkedIn by their first name, and I'm like, these people have no idea who we are. But it also says like you have like, there is like you have created almost like a personal connection with these people because of who they are, how they carry themselves, and what their personality is.
That's a really good point. And it's an interesting line to walk too, right? Like some people see transparency, like being transparent online, being authentic, as sharing a lot about both their personal and professional lives. Some are deeply private. Some, you could argue, might overshare, whatever that looks like. So it's interesting, but I think you can, like I said before, you can find your community, and your community can find you. Like Andy said, it's just about how you want to connect and what you want to connect on.
All right. So last question is, we have our magic wand, and if you can wave it, what's the biggest problem in B2B marketing right now that you would fix?
I'm sorry, was that a wand? Like an actual wand?
Yeah, it's my son's.
It's not one of the Harry Potter.
It is a Harry Potter wand. I swear to God.
No, I want you to get I
registered.
don't know if you guys have been bombarded with these ads. Sorry, I'm going to go off on a small tangent. Then you can answer your question. They make like the Harry Potter wands now that you can actually like shoot explosives out of. I don't know if they're really explosives, but
no,
like
they're like burning pieces of paper. And he wants me to do that and like shoot across the room at my bath window.
I do.
Yeah.
I don't see a problem. That could be fine.
The couch right underneath it might have a problem with
I
it.
mean, in all the ads, they're using it in the house. So I think it's got to be like relatively safe. It's like Pop Rocks. Remember Pop Rocks? Like you go to the county fair and
those scare me to this day. So now that you bring those up, I don't know if I'm sold.
All right. Sorry. Anyways, biggest problem with B2B.
Sorry, yeah, that was a yes. So biggest problem with B2B, I think we've all seen it this year and last year too, really since COVID. Budgets keep getting slashed. Like people are just, like I said earlier, just working with bare bones budgets, teams, resources. And the first thing to go is creativity, in my opinion. You just need to do what you know is going to work. Even if it's outdated, you're just going to do it and just focus on that. But we hear it all the time. I don't know if I fully agree with the sentence like B2B is boring. I think we just need to inject unique creativity into it. But in order to do that, you have to be willing to, and have the buy-in from your leadership team to make like strategic calculated risks. I think influencer marketing in the B2B space is still considered one. But you can still define success. Like you can still have goals attached to it, but you have to get creative. You have to think outside the box. And it's not like you have to reinvent the wheel, but make your own wheel, and just be open to seeing what creativity looks like for your brand and for your audience.
Well said. All right. So bring us on home with 3 actionable takeaways for today's listeners.
3 takeaways. 1, even if you're running experiments with influencer marketing, define success up front. Don't try and define it halfway through the campaign or at the end. You're going to have a hard time getting buy-in from your leadership team if you don't align at the beginning, and you're going to have a hard time defining success for yourself and for the influencers that you work with. So get really clear on what you're trying to achieve and what your goals are. 2, do as much research as you can on the influencers that you want to work with. So like I said at the beginning or near the beginning, understand who your audience is, what kind of content they engage with, who they trust, and then make sure that the influencers that you want to work with don't just have manufactured engagement or just haven't actually built trust. Like see how their engagement is, see how you vibe with their content, how your brand aligns with their values, and make sure it's a good fit. It can still be a test, but there should be initial criteria to define that. And 3, I would say get creative on what influencer marketing looks like. It does not have to look like just sponsored posts. Just today, I release a template of a company personal branding policy that I worked on with a company that focuses on like business development. And that was really fun. And it's a great way to engage with influencers and build trust with their audience outside of just a one-time post.
Cool. All right. Well, Brianna, thank you so much for joining us today. How can people connect with you and learn more about Verbatim?
Well, thanks for having me. And you can find me on LinkedIn. I basically live on here. I'm nowhere else. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Website is weareverbatim.com. And if you're looking for an agency, we would love to work with you.
Awesome. Well, check out verbatim.com, like, subscribe, check out this episode and more on our streaming platforms. Catch you guys next time.
Bye.